The wind rolled across the abandoned plains like the exhausted breath of a world that had forgotten itself, carrying whispers of stories that had been buried beneath ash, silence, and the memory of things too painful to name. And as the fractured sky bled streaks of crimson light over the distant mountain ridges, Kael stood alone at the edge of the ruined outpost, staring into the horizon as though he could force it to reveal its secrets by sheer stubbornness alone, for this was the day he had been dreading since the moment the oracle had spoken the prophecy of the Echo born, a destiny he never asked for and certainly never wanted. Yet now that the shadows were lengthening and the seals of the ancient vaults had begun to crack open beneath the crust of the dying world, he understood that running had never truly been an option, not when the threads of fate had already wound themselves around his soul, pulling him forward whether he wished it or not. And so he gripped the worn leather strap of his pack, feeling its weight like a reminder of the journey that had forged him and the responsibilities that had carved themselves into his spine with every step he took away from the life he once knew, a life that now felt like the dream of a child who had no idea how quickly innocence could be shattered, how abruptly everything could change with just a single echo from the depths of the unknown. And as he began to move toward the shattered highway that stretched like the spine of some forgotten beast across the wasteland, the memories rose unbidden. His village burning beneath a storm of spectral fire, his mother's desperate voice urging him to run, the way the sky had cracked open like fragile glass as the echo rift pulsed for the first time in centuries, and he felt the old ache tighten in his chest, an ache that he had learned to live with but never truly escaped, even in the quiet moments when the world seemed almost peaceful, almost normal, almost whole, but peace had become a rumor and normalcy a ghost, and the world was anything but whole, for the echo rift had awakened something ancient, something hungry, something that whispered in the forgotten tongues of creation, calling to those who carried its resonance in their blood, and Kael was one of them, marked not by choice but by fate's cruel sense of irony, for he had once dreamed only of being a builder, a simple craftsman shaping homes and tools from stone and iron, never imagining that he would one day walk the path of warriors, seers, and wanderers, never imagining that he would be hunted for the power he never wanted but could not surrender. Yet as the ashes swirled around his boots and the fractured sky dimmed to the bruised violet of approaching night, he felt something shift within him, a small but undeniable spark of resolve, for he knew now that the world would not heal itself, that the broken would not mend without hands willing to bear the cost, and even though the burden was immense and the road ahead churned with danger, he would not turn back, not when so much had already been lost, not when so many depended on him without even knowing his name. And so he walked, each step echoing through the silence like a promise forged from fire and sorrow, until the outpost lay far behind him and the ruins of the forgotten city loomed ahead, its skeletal towers reaching toward the sky like pleading fingers, its streets choked with vines, rusted metal, and whispers of old tragedies. And as he crossed the threshold into its shadow, a chill ran down his spine, for the Echo-born were not the only ones who had felt the stirring of ancient power. Others had awakened too, creatures twisted by the rift's energy, drawn to its resonance like moths to flame, and Kael could feel them watching. From the gloom, their breath like frost on the back of his neck, their intentions unmistakably lethal, yet he pressed on, drawing the blade he had forged from the remnants of the riftstone shard he had once foolishly believed he could bury and forget, its surface glowing with a faint pulse of white-blue energy that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat. And as he stepped deeper into the ruins, he whispered, more to himself than to the shadows, "I didn't ask for this, but I'll finish it," a vow carried by the wind across the broken world, a vow sealed by the distant rumble of thunder as the fractured sky trembled once more, signaling that the war for the fate of the world had begun far earlier than anyone had expected and that Kael was already too deep to turn back now, no matter how impossible the odds or how terrifying the path ahead seemed, for destiny was not a chain but a calling, and though Kael had spent years running from that call, he now walked toward it with a heart full of scars, a blade full of light, and a future full of uncertainty, determined to face whatever came next even if it cost him everything he had left. And as the city's shadows closed around him and a distant roar echoed through the hollow streets, Kael whispered a final quiet breath to the fractured sky above, "May the echoes guide me." Night had fallen in the ruins with the suffocating weight of a shroud, wrapping the broken city in darkness so thick that even the faint glow of the riftstone blade seemed to struggle against it, flickering like a dying star as Kael slipped through the overgrown streets, his senses sharpened to painful intensity, for the creatures that prowled these shadows were not merely beasts but warped echoes of ancient memories, twisted into physical form by the rift's pulse, creatures that remembered the world not as it was but as it had been long before human hands shaped its mountains, rivers, and cities, and they moved with a predatory intelligence that made every footstep feel like an invitation to death. Yet Kael pressed on, guided by the faint, rhythmic hum that resonated in his chest. The call of the echo vault that lay hidden beneath the city's core, the source of the power he had been destined to face, the cradle of the prophecy he had spent years trying to deny. And with every step he felt the air thicken, vibrating with an energy that prickled beneath his skin, stirring something ancient within him, something that wasn't entirely human, and he trembled not from fear but from recognition, as though a part of him had waited lifetimes for this moment, though he could not understand why. And then the ground quaked beneath his feet, a deep, resonant tremor that sent dust spiraling from the skeletal remains of buildings around him, and Kael froze as a low, guttural rumble rolled through the night, echoing across the stone like distant thunder. And when he turned toward the sound, he saw them, shadows peeling themselves from the alleyways, forming shapes that slithered, crawled, and stalked toward him with eyes like burning coals and bodies that flickered between form and formlessness, their claws scraping the pavement with a metallic screech that made Kael's heartbeat spike, and for a single breath he felt the old fear grip him, the memory of that night when the rift first opened and creatures like these tore through his home, stealing everything he loved. But he forced the fear down, forcing his pulse to steady as he raised the glowing blade, its hum growing louder, brighter, as though responding to the threat, as though awakening to purpose, and with a roar that tore itself from his throat, Kael lunged into the swarm, each swing of his blade cleaving through shadow flesh with bursts of white-blue light, each movement driven not by training or strategy but by raw instinct, the kind that came not from his own experience but from the echoes of warriors long dead, their memories searing through him, guiding his hands, his steps, his resolve, until the world became a blur of light, shadow, and the sound of his own breathing, ragged and sharp. And though the creatures closed in from all sides, he fought with a ferocity that surprised even him, carving a path through their ranks until the last of them dissolved into smoke, leaving the street littered with fading echoes of darkness and Kael gasping for breath, sweat dripping down his brow as the blade dimmed once more in his hand, its glow settling into a steady pulse that matched his heartbeat. But there was no time to rest, for the tremor beneath the earth intensified, and the hum in his chest grew stronger, pulling him toward the city's heart, where a massive, crumbling tower rose like the spine of a fallen titan, its base split open by ancient earthquakes, revealing a downward passage that plunged into the depths of the earth. And though every bone in Kael's body screamed that entering such a place was madness, he knew he had no choice, for destiny waited below, and the fate of the world trembled on its edge, and so he descended into the darkness, each step echoing like the beat of a war drum, each breath heavy with the weight of what he was about to face, until he reached the bottom of the cavern, where a vast chamber stretched before him, illuminated by the pulsating glow of the echo vault, an immense sphere of crystalline energy suspended above the ground, its surface swirling with shapes, memories, and voices that whispered in 1,000 forgotten languages. And Kael felt his knees weaken, for in that moment he understood the true nature of the rift. It was not merely a tear in the sky or a source of destructive power but a living memory of the world itself, a vessel that held every triumph and tragedy, every birth and death, every echo of existence. And he realized that his destiny was not to destroy it but to merge with it, to become the bridge that would either heal the world or shatter it beyond repair. And the weight of that truth nearly crushed him, pressing against his ribs like the hands of a merciless giant. Yet when he reached out and placed his hand upon the vault's surface, the world exploded into light, memories flooding him with the force of a tidal wave, showing him visions of civilizations long buried, battles fought by heroes whose names had been erased by time, and the moment when the sky first fractured, releasing the echoes that now threatened to consume everything. And through it all he heard a single voice calling his name, gentle yet powerful, a voice he somehow recognized though he'd never heard it before. Kael, you are the balance, it said, and the storm rises not to destroy you, but to awaken you. And as the light enveloped him and the chamber shook as though the world itself were being torn apart, Kael felt the power surge through him, changing him, shaping him, making him something more than human. And as the storm of echoes roared around him, he opened his eyes, now glowing with the same white-blue light as the riftstone blade, and whispered into the void, "I'm ready," knowing that when he emerged from the vault, he would no longer be the frightened wanderer who had entered the ruins but the echo-born who would decide the fate of the world. And as the vision faded and darkness swept over him, only one truth remained clear: the rising storm was only the beginning, and the final battle was still to come.